This is the shir of Yud Beis Nissan. It's Daf Perek Lamed Tes, Daf Nun Gimel on base, page 106, near the bottom of the page. What's the nekuda that we've been learning about for the last few prakim? The nekuda we've been learning for the last few prakim is as follows. The most important thing is Maisa. No doubt about it. The most important thing is Maisa. Why is Maisa the most important thing? Because it's mevared the world, right? It's mevared your nefesh habahamis, it's mevared the guf, it's mevared your gashu, it's mevared chalkei ba'elam. And when Klal Yisrael collectively is mevared the whole world, so we bring a dira b'tachtain, we bring Hashem into this world, as we discussed at length. Then the Alter Rebbe said in the beginning of chapter 38, Perek Lamed Ches, even though it's true that the most important thing is action, kavanah is important. And went into a whole thing about different types of kavanah. Remember, Deimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber. Action, speech. Dechil Ruchim Utivim, Dechil Ruchim Usichlim. In this Perek Lamed Tes, we learned that there's two dimensions to the higher worlds. The Beis HaMikdash of the higher worlds and the worlds themselves, right? The Beis HaMikdash of Atzilus is the Esespheres, the Beis HaMikdash of Bria is the Esespheres of Bria, and so forth. And then the worlds. And based on our kavanah, we affect the Parcha L'El. It ascends upwards. If a person has a kavanah of a merkava, it ascends to the Esespheres of Atzilus. And the Alter Rebbe said about this, Ein lanu ezik ben estares, this is a very high madrege. This is for tzadikim gedolim, the Alter Rebbe calls them. Tchil Ruchim Usichlim, which is Bria, he says tzadikim, Malas tzadikim stam agdela from Malachim. But the madrega of Merkava, the Alter Rebbe says in the bottom of the Gimel Amar Aleph, 6 lines from the bottom, 7 lines from the bottom, Shaheim tzadikim hagdelim. Tzadikim hagdelim, they reach the Esespheres of Atzilus. Stam tzadikim, they have the Chil Ruchim Usichlim, Midas Avavayir, which come from intellect, which reaches the Beis HaMikdash of Bria. Then there is the Chil Ruchim Utivim, which reaches the Beis HaMikdash of Yetzira. And I mentioned to you that the Alter Rebbe is going to say in the Hagah, near the end of Perek Mem, Oyafilu ba'asfiyah b'yutzvira the Kedusha makei mitzvahs maisis. If you do a mitzvah maisis with the proper kavanah, it goes up at least to the Beis HaMikdash of Asiyah Ruchnis. So kavanah is important. What does kavanah affect? Kavanah affects a Parcha L'El. The mitzvah should ascend upwards. Correct? Now, there's a problem. What happens if you have no kavanah? Now, in not having a kavanah, there's two madregas. One is, you have no kavanah at all. You're doing a mitzvah, you have zero kavanah. And the other is, that not only you have no kavanah, but you have a negative kavanah. Like lehischabed ba, to get covered from it, to use the Torah for some kind of an advantage. And of course, the worst madrega of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs that could be is amanat lakanted, where you're learning it and doing it to destroy it. This is madregas in shalei lishma. So if you think about it, you have three possibilities. Number one, you do a mitzvah with a kavanah, so it affects Parcha L'El. Number two, you do a mitzvah with zero kavanah, so it's not Parcha L'El, but it's not negative. And number three, when you do it with a kavanah shalei lishma. So in the previous shtickle, the Alter Rebbe said that if you do a mitzvah with zero kavanah, it's like doing a mitzvah without lishma. So the Alter Rebbe gave a mashal. I think he gave a mashal. What was the mashal? That you're not going to do something for another person unless you like them, right? Lishma, you don't do things for people unless you like them. You wouldn't do things for Hashem unless you like Him. If you have no feelings for the Eibishter, this is called shalei lishma. Then comes today's shir, Tanya Yud Beis Nissan. Well, Kabbalah Sale is a level of kavanah. Kabbalah Sale is a level of kavanah if there's chayas in it, which the Alter Rebbe says in the Hagah, in the end of Perek Mem, this of one line, Afilu, Asiyah, bottom of page 110, B'yutzvir is the Kedusha, Makei Mitzvahs Maisis. Go back, go forward, page 110. Yeah. This Hagah, the first 8 words, Ayafilu, Asiyah, B'yutzvir is the Kedusha, Makei Mitzvahs Maisis, stop. These are saying that the Kabbalah, I think the pshat of it, that there's a kavanah of Kabbalah Sale which ascends to the Esespheres of Asiyah. Okay? We're talking board. Mitzvah nashim olamad. Tir, asameisi mitzvah nashim olamad. And today's shir begins with something even worse than that. And that is, when a person has a negative kavanah, not they have no kavanah, but they have a negative kavanah. For example, a shul is a pniyah with an ulterior motivation. L'kaved atzmei, to honor himself, to be considered a Talmud Chacham, and so on. Like the Alter Rebbe Azaiso then, that ulterior motivation, that extraneous basis, shemitad klipa the nega, which obviously comes from klipa, mislabeshes beterose, becomes a garment over the Torah, and it conceals it. And as a result, the Torah is in Golus inside the Klippa. When you do a mitzvah with no kavanah at all, you're going to see later on what Alter Rebbe is going to say about doing a mitzvah with no kavanah at all. He's going to say that when you do a mitzvah with no kavanah at all, he's going to say Safkol Saf Tzalakus. It's a lakus on a neshama, but it's a lakus. When you do a mitzvah with a negative kavanah, the negativity conceals over the godliness, which is called Golus, which is what's Klippa. Klippa means a divine spark that's covered over by something extraneous that prevents it from manifesting. Yiddishkeit, Teda, mitzvahs, tefillah is a lakus. When you do it with a negative kavanah, it's in Golus. But it's lefisha, it's only temporary. Because since this negative kavanah is not so bad, therefore it's not sholosh klipos meis lagamri, which makes the mitzvah an aveda, which makes the Teda bad, like if you're learning, for example, lakanter. And therefore it's only lefisha. Adashah said tshuva. Until you do tshuva. And when a person does tshuva, it brings a healing to the world. That shebeshuv el Hashem, when you return to the Eibishter through your tshuva, gam teras also your Teda shava ime returns together with the person. So you have to understand what he's saying here. What does tshuva mean? Tshuva means I pasha did naveda. So that's tshuva. Tshuva means I did something wrong, right? And I need to repair it. That's like tshuva. Tshuva, I did something wrong. When you learn Teda shalosh motzah naveda, create a klip over Yiddishkeit. I have to do tshuva. And after you do tshuva, you've taken off the shell that exists over your Teda, so there's a possibility for the Teda to have an aliyah. And the Alter Rebbe says, "V'lachein Omer Azal," what the Gemara says, "La'elam yasik adam v'chula." A person should always learn Teda and do mitzvahs. Shalei lishma, shemitoich shalei lishma, balashma. The end is from doing things shalei lishma will come to lishma. So the Alter Rebbe translates, "What's mean teich shalei lishma?" Shalei lishma doesn't mean no kavana. Shalei lishma means even a negative kavana. He's a pniya. Liyes tamid chacham. Shemitech shalei lishma balashma translates Alter Rebbe bevadai for sure. Shebavadai, because certainly Sefer Elah says tshuva, a person is always going to do tshuva, begilgal zay, begilgal acher, either in this incarnation or in a different incarnation. Kilei yidach men yidach, Hashem is never going to let any Jew get lost, right? And Hashem is never going to let any godliness get lost. And this Teda and this mitzvah is godliness. No, but then it's in kedusha. No, but then it's in galus. So the Eibishter is going to make sure that sooner or later this spark of Teda and mitzvah is going to be redeemed from the galus. And the Alter Rebbe is advocating not learning it with no particular kavanah. Even with a kavanah that's considered shalei lishma, negative kavanah, it's also worthwhile. Says the Rebbe, however, until now, in other words, what we just discussed is a person learning Teda with a negative kavanah. Kishayis stam. If a person does a mitzvah, learns Teda stam, Lishma, he's not doing it with a kavanah lishma. He's not demonstrating avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. Would affect a parcha le'ela to atzilas, bri yitzira asiya. But v'leisha lishma doesn't have a negative kavanah. Says the Rebbe, ein hadavat ali b'tshuva. There's no necessity for tshuva. If you learned it shalei lishma, you've created a klipa around Yiddishkeit, you have to have tshuva. But if you've done it with no kavanah at all, you don't have to do tshuva because you didn't do anything wrong. No, but then you didn't do it with lebedekeit, with vitality. The moment you return and learn this thing again, lishma. Harei, so then, what you learned without any particular kavanah at all, mischaber attaches itself, and it's corrected and healed. To the second time you're learning it, and now you're learning it lishma, or parcha le'el, and it ascends upwards. There was nothing wrong with your Teda and mitzvahs. There was simply something not right about your Teda and mitzvahs. So there's no klipa, there's no golus covering it over, correct? So there's no need for tshuva. All you have to do is learn it over again. And he repeats the second time. And therefore, a person should learn Teda and mitzvah shalei lishma. But over here, shalei lishma doesn't mean with a negative kavanah. It means with zero kavanah. So the Rebbe says the same Ma'ameh Chazal. Whether shalei lishma means with no kavanah, or even if shalei lishma means with a negative kavanah. If shalei lishma means with no kavanah, all you got to do is learn it over again with kavanah. If it's a negative kavanah, you have to do tshuva. And the same is true when it comes to learning davening without kavanah. It doesn't say that all you got to do is daven over again. Or as I mentioned, I showed you when we learned it. The Alter Rebbe says in the first three shtikalach of the are based on Tanya Perek Mem, which we're about to begin. And he writes over there, Tisanta Loshen. If I can find it, I'll show it to you. He says on page 308, he says that if a person learned davened without any kavanah, right in the middle of the page, in the parentheses, it's very easy to repair davening without kavanah. Page 308, Kufnan Dalam and Beis. The parenthesis. Lachazeh to return, v'lalais and to lift up the davening. And what is that? Listen to this. A person davens b'kavana. Tefillah achas meluketes. Even if you could collect one collecting of davening, mitfilas kol hashana, if in the course of the entire year you have one good davening, it lifts up all the 364 other days of davenings, which were shalei lishma, ach shalei lishma mamish. You understand? With neutral davening without any kavana, it's not in klipa, but it's not parcha le'ela, and it's easy to fix. Learning the same thing. He says, going back to our page now. Page Nadal, go back to us. V'chein oyin betfila. First says leilam yasek adam v'chuli. V'chein oyin betfila. So sai teire, sai tefila, and lecheire, sai mitzvahs. Although it's not so pashat, you can make a parcha leila. So remember what we have. We have shalei lishma mamish requires tshuva, and I'm going to propose that after you do tshuva, it doesn't automatically go up. After you do tshuva, you break the klipa, the golus. Then you have to learn it over lishma to make it lift it up. It's a 2-step process. You understand? But if you learned it with no kavanah, all you got to do is learn it over again. That's the end of the shiur of